12-team playoff is finally here. Let's take a look at each of the first four round one matchups and then look and see how the rest of the bracket could shake out. Welcome back to No Huddle Sports. Here you can see our bracket, all the first round games and the teams with the first round byes. So we're going to start by looking at the first game coming up on Friday night. Notre Dame and Indiana will kick off the first round Friday night at 7 p.m. in South Bend. It's going to be a nice, cool 26 degrees. Both teams are coming in at 11-1. Notre Dame, with their one loss coming to Northern Illinois week 2 of the season, really kind of seemed to jumpstart them and propel them to go on a 10-game winning streak. And then Indiana, their one loss coming just a few weeks ago to Ohio State. We'll take a look and see what each team brings to this matchup and how each team can come out ahead. When you compare these two teams on paper, as you can see in the graphic here, both 11-1 have similar point differentials, both 25-26, similar offensive production, similar yards given up on defense, and then similar strength of schedule. This game and then the game between Ohio State and Tennessee are what I'm calling my coin flip matchups, where I think a couple of things go one way or the other. Any team or both teams have a chance to win this one. So for Notre Dame, the key thing, this one for Notre Dame, I think is they're going to be their rushing game. So right now they're averaging 6 yards per carry, which is second best in the country, going up against Indiana, who right now has the number one rush defense, giving up about just 76 yards per game on the ground. They did give up over 100 in their loss to Ohio State. So in their last 3 games, though, Notre Dame has rushed for over 200 yards and then over 250 twice. So I think if they can get over that 150-yard mark, which is doubling what Indiana usually gives up to opponents, I think that will definitely favor the Fighting Irish. But I think if Indiana can get in there and control the line of scrimmage and keep them under 100 yards rushing or right at 100 yards rushing, I think that will favor the Hoosiers and force Notre Dame to kind of beat them through the air. For Indiana, I want to see if they can move the ball against a quality opponent. So the two best opponents they've played so far this year, in my opinion, Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State held them under 150 yards, and then Michigan held them under 250. They did beat Michigan, but it was definitely not their banner performance offensively. So Notre Dame is currently the 7th ranked defense in the country in yards allowed, and they're giving up just 13 points per game as a defense. So I want to see if Indiana can put everything together against one of these quality opponents and move the football and kind of execute the way they have against the Purdue, where they put up 66 points. I want to see if they can get over 350 yards, which I think if they can, I think that will favor Indiana. So it'll show that they can move the ball, take some pressure off their defense, and put up some points. But I think if Notre Dame's defense is able to hold up and hold strong and keep them under 250, I think that will really stifle the Hoosiers defense or the Hoosiers offense just enough to where I think they can run the football and take advantage and kind of milk the clock and really swing this in Notre Dame's favor. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I think this is one of the more evenly matched games going into round one, with Ohio State, Tennessee being the other one. I really think that if Indiana is able to control the line of scrimmage and limit Notre Dame's rushing attack, and then also move the ball against a top-ranked defense that Notre Dame has, I think they would be able to pull out this one. Notre Dame, on the flip side, they've got to really run the ball well and limit Indiana's offense. But I think Indiana will have enough in this one. I think they eke out a tight one. I think it'll be really, really close. I think, Indiana will win a tight one and advance to play Georgia in the quarterfinals. Next up on the docket, we have Penn State and SMU playing at 11 a.m. At Penn State. Both teams are coming in at 11-2. So let's get into kind of their resumes and what makes up this matchup. Yeah, like I said, both teams are 11-2. Both teams played in their conference championships last weekend and lost, or 2 weeks ago and lost. So they've had one extra game. So there's not really an advantage or disadvantage in this one since they both played that extra game. SMU kind of had that drop off. They were projected to be the 3 seed going in, get upset by Clemson. So now they're playing on the road instead of having a first round bye. Want to see how their team is able to handle that, kind of flip the mindset, going from the home team to, yeah, being on the road in the cold. I think it's supposed to be 20-ish degrees at kickoff, so it should be nice and chilly for those Texas boys. Penn State, were definitely the underdog going to their championship game. They played a heck of a matchup. They put up more points than most people probably thought they would have against Oregon. Made it a tight one. So we'll see if they come into this with a little bit of a letdown, or if they're able to build off that offensive performance and kind of channel that into this game here against SMU. This is one of the first round matchups where you get to see the first major disparity in strength of schedule. Penn State with a top 30 strength of schedule, and then SMU with 57th. So we'll be able to really see here if, yeah, playing a Big Ten schedule versus an ACC schedule, if that makes Penn State the better team, or if you can build just as good of a team and play in the ACC and your strength of schedule is what it is. You can't really choose your opponents every year. So I think that's one thing to watch for me in this one. Keys for the game for me on this one is going to be Penn State's rushing attack versus SMU's passing attack. So for Penn State, they rushed for over 300 yards against Oregon. Against Maryland, they had over 200. And then in their closest game as of late, they had just about 117 against Minnesota. That was just a 1 point victory for them. SMU against Clemson, they gave up 64 yards on the ground. Cal 95, and then against Virginia 65. So over that same game period, SMU's holding opponents under 100 yards rushing. And then in the one game where Penn State was held close to 100 yards rushing, they had just that 1 point victory, 2 point victory. So it's really, I think that is why it's a key for me in this one, is if Penn State is able to run the ball and I think get close to the 200 yard or over number, definitely I feel like that'll be a key for Penn State to kind of get ahead in this one. But if SMU is able to hold them close to that 100-yard number like Minnesota did, I think SMU is a better offense than Minnesota. So I think if they can hold Penn State down and force them under 100 yards, try to beat them through the air, I think if it becomes that kind of matchup where they're throwing the ball down the field, both teams trying to air it out like they did Penn State against Oregon, I think that definitely favors SMU. Now, my key for SMU was their passing game. So last 3 games, Clemson, Cal, and Virginia all had over 300 yards through the air. For Penn State, last 3 games, Oregon, Maryland, Minnesota, they gave up 280 to Oregon, then under 200 for the next two, 150 and 175. So for comparison, Oregon has the 20th ranked passing offense in yards per game. SMU is the 13th. So I think just for a little comparison, I think they both possess the ability to really throw the ball through the air with some success. So we'll see if SMU is able to dissect the Penn State defense in a similar level that Oregon did. So I think SMU needs to get to that 300 number again, probably more than 300, in order for them to have success in this one. If they're able to get over 300, I think that'll show that they're able to really move the ball and kind of pass against and also protect the quarterback, give them time, run their offense the way they want to, will be a good indicator. It will also force Penn State to play a style of football that they don't usually play. They did get in a shootout with Oregon, and it was a closer game than most people would have predicted. but it's not. I don't think it's a style of football that they want to play. They would much rather, which is why it was my key, really kind of control the ball, run the ball on the ground, and let their defense play from a lead and kind of shorten the game by running the ball. So I think if SMU can get over that 300 number, I think that tilts it in their favor. Now for Penn State, I think if they can hold them at 200 or less, probably around that 150 number, 175 like they did with Minnesota and Maryland, I think that'll definitely tip it towards the Nittany Lions. And this one, it comes down to, I think I like SMU's ability to throw the ball, even in the cold weather, and create some explosive plays. I also like their defense to get in there. They've shown in the last 3 weeks that they can hold opponents under 100 yards rushing. I think that'll be key. If they force Penn State to get into a run and gun kind of shootout matchup with SMU, I think that's really going to lean it towards SMU, which is why I have the Mustangs to go in there and pull off the upset against Penn State and advance to play Boise State in the next round. Next up, Texas and Clemson playing at 3 p.m. in Austin, Texas. Texas coming in at 11-2, both losses to Georgia. Clemson coming in at 10-3 off of their 56-yard walk-off to win the ACC championship game. Both teams are 2-1 over their last 3 games. Let's get into kind of the resumes of each of these two teams. So Texas has the 20th strength of schedule in the country. Clemson is the 35th. Texas's point differential is plus 21 to Clemson's plus 11. Texas is at almost 450 yards per game on offense, giving up just 250 on defense, whereas Clemson is having about 400 yards per game, and they're giving up about 360. So, I mean, you look at this on paper, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, Texas really should be able to get in there and dominate this one. But we'll kind of dig into why I think that will or will not happen and some of the keys I have for the game on this one. One of the things I want to look at in this one is, can Texas run the football? So the 2 losses so far on the year, Texas has been held under 30 yards rushing against Georgia. Now, in the 2 games prior to Georgia, they kind of been figuring things out on the ground. They ran for over 200 yards against Kentucky and Texas A&M. So they're going to need another similar type performance. I don't know if they'll need quite 200, but I think between the trio of running backs and Quinn, maybe Arch, I think they definitely need to get over 150 yards on the ground just to create that balance. It also takes some pressure off the defense because they'll have a little bit longer drives, more sustained drives, and then it'll give Quinn time to sit back and run play action passes where he'll have time to throw and really dissect this Clemson defense. So I think running game is going to be a really important thing to look at in this one. Now, I think if Clemson is able to hold Texas under 100 yards on the ground, I think that will really kind of tip the scales in the Tigers' favor. I think if they're able to then not worry about the run and just kind of tee off on Quinn Ewers and kind of get creative with some blitz packages and force him to make some throws that he's uncomfortable with. Because that's when Quinn has struggled the most. If you can get him out of his rhythm and off timing, that's when he makes the most mistakes. If you let him sit back there, no pressure, he'll pick you apart. So that'll be key for Clemson in this one. In their 3 losses on the year, Clemson has given up 267, 210, and 169 on the ground. That's kind of where that 150 number came in. I think if Texas is able to get to that 150 number, they'll be able to hand Clemson their 4th loss on the year. Clemson is going to need to make some big plays against this Texas defense. That's really kind of their MO. They make a couple big shots here or there, and then they're able to capitalize on those big plays and momentum and turn those drives into touchdowns. They had 4 plays against SMU of 20 yards or more. 2 of them went for touchdowns. So they're going to need a lot more of that against this Texas defense. Now, Texas' defense is a whole different animal than SMU's. They give up just 143 yards through the air on the season. They're one of the top defenses against the pass in the country, and they give up the least amount of explosive plays. They're really good at limiting explosive plays on defense and forcing you to drive the length of the field. So I think for Clemson to use this in their advantage, they're going to need to have more than a few plays. And when they do get the big plays, whether they go for touchdowns or not, they need to capitalize and get points. I think Clemson really needs to turn this into a shootout in order for it to run in their favor. And the explosive plays is one way for them to do that. Now, if Texas can play stellar defense like they have all year, I think that will be a non-factor. Texas, like I said, they give up the least amount of big plays on the year. If they force Clemson to have to put together consecutive drives, moving the ball up and down the field, the whole length of the field, they don't let them, get the big play. I think that definitely favors Texas. So with all that said, I think Texas's defense is just too good. I think they're going to show up, and I think they're going to really limit what Clemson is able to do on offense. And I think Texas's defense is able to figure it out. The last few games have shown, or in Clemson's losses, they were susceptible to the run, and I think Quintravian Wisner is going to be able to move the ball, and I expect to see potentially some more arch packages in this game to kind of create some balance and move the ball on the ground, take some pressure off Quinn and this passing game. And if Texas is able to do that, I see no reason why Texas won't win this one and advance to play Arizona State in the next round. And in the final game of the first round, we have Tennessee and Ohio State playing at 7 p.m. in Columbus, Ohio. Both teams are coming in at 10-2. Both teams sat out their championship game weekend, so they've had plenty of rest. They kind of got there different ways. Tennessee knew they were going to be potentially in this position. They were able to kind of just accept their fate and know that they could be hosting, but there was a strong possibility they could be on the road. Mentally prepare for this one. Whereas Ohio State were supposed to be in their Big Ten championship game, get the rematch against Oregon, and then they just kind of get smacked in the mouth at home by Michigan as 20-point favorites. They lose that one. So they got a really bad taste in their mouth. Ohio State fans aren't happy. So I'll be interested to see which team shows up in this one. And if they can show up and really compete well with this Tennessee team, because I think they're just two very different mindsets coming into this one. Like I mentioned earlier, I think this Ohio State-Tennessee game is similar to the Notre Dame-Indiana game. I think it's a coin flip game. I think both teams are very similar on paper. They've got similar strength of schedules, same records. So it's going to be a very evenly matched, well-fought football game. I'm super excited to watch. This was one of my games where I was like, this is the game I'm most excited to watch in the first round of the playoffs. So let's kind of get into the keys and what I think will be the difference in this one. So my key for Tennessee in this one is they have got to be able to run the football. So Ohio State is coming in with the 6th best run defense, giving up just under 100 yards at 97 per game, whereas Tennessee is coming in with the 10th best rushing yards per game with 262. So it'll be a little bit of what's going to give. Can Tennessee come in here and really run the ball with Dylan Sampson, currently averaging 5 yards per carry? And I think if they're able to do that and get the rushing yards up over 200, the reason why I say over 200, so in their wins against Vandy, they had 280, and then they had 214 in their win against Bama. Then in their losses, they were held under 150 against Georgia and then under 200 against Arkansas. So that's kind of where I think 200 yards is that teetering point. Where if they get over 200, it will give plenty of opportunities for Nico Maliva to make plays in the passing game, take some pressure off him, and then let Josh Heupel kind of call his offense and let it run the way it's supposed to be on schedule. So I think that is really the key for Tennessee in this one. Now for Ohio State, I think if they're able to hold Tennessee under that 150, similar to what Georgia did, even under that 200 number, like like Arkansas did, I think that really kind of brings it more towards the Buckeyes, where they're going to have to make more plays through the air, and it gives them opportunities with their experienced secondary to kind of take advantage of a freshman quarterback, with all of the lights and sounds and pageantry going on in the playoff game on the road. So I think that will that will really flip this for Ohio State. Now, the key for me, for Ohio State in general, is just going to be their offense. So they're going up against arguably one of the best defenses they faced all year. Tennessee is ranked sixth in the country, just in yards allowed, giving up just over 100 yards on the ground and then 180 through the air. So less than 300 yards per game they're giving up. Tennessee only gave up 212 against Vandy, 230 against UTEP, and then they did in their loss to Georgia, they gave up 450. So it's kind of gives you the idea, the vibe that Ohio State needs to have more of a Georgia type game than the UTEP and Vandy type game. I know those are different caliber teams, but that's kind of the ball game that Ohio State's going to have on offense. And then Ohio State, speaking of that, is kind of trending downward. So they had 420 against Northwestern, and then 316 against Indiana, and then they had just 250 against Michigan. So I know they won against Northwestern and Indiana pretty handily, but they lost to Michigan, and they had really kind of that rock fight, where they were trying to outrush against Michigan, and they weren't able to do it. So I think Ohio State is going to have balance and kind of move the ball similar to how they did against Oregon, or against Indiana a couple weeks ago. They need to have over 300 yards, I think, combined through the air, on the ground, have some balance, move the ball, and then kind of use home field advantage to their advantage, and kind of play the way they're supposed to. I think that is what Ohio State will have to do to win this one. Now, with all that, with Tennessee, though, I think if they are able to lock down the receivers and force Ohio State to get into a I'm tougher than you, kind of rushing, I'm going to run the ball through you, you're going to run the ball through me kind of matchup, I think that definitely favors Tennessee. If they can force Ohio State to become one-dimensional, then I think, yeah, that'll favor Tennessee in this one. As I was mentioning earlier, I think this is one of those coin flip games where a couple things go one way or the other. Both teams have a really good shot to win this one. But I think those things will flip towards Tennessee in this one. I think they're going to be able to go in there and run the ball the way they want to and kind of get into their offensive flow, and their defense will have enough to slow down Ohio State. I think Tennessee's mental state, just how they got in versus how Ohio State got in, I think that'll play a factor. And so I like Tennessee to go in there and upset Ohio State and advance to play Oregon in the next round. Now that we have broken down all of the first round matchups, let's go ahead and take a look at what those second round matchups will be. We'll have Texas and Arizona State. We'll have Tennessee and Oregon. We'll have Boise State and SMU, and then Georgia and Indiana. I think Texas is just too talented, and I think they will be able to stifle Cam Scatbo and the Sun Devils offense with their defense and kind of move on to the next round. Tennessee and Oregon, I think Oregon is able to get prepared and show why they're the number one team in the country, and I like them to move on from there. SMU and Boise State, I think SMU is able to slow down Ashton Jitney, and I think SMU is able to win a tight one and advance to the next round there. And then Georgia will be just too much, and I think they will have no problem handling Indiana. So now in the semifinals, I have Texas and Oregon, SMU and Georgia. I think Texas' defense, that's what they're going to lean on going in. If Quinn Ewers and the offense are able to get things figured out, I think they have no problem winning any of these games. But I really think they'll lean on their defense and then figure out a way to get the ball moving on the ground and then mix in some arch packages here and there. But I think Texas will be able to beat Oregon, advance to the national championship game. SMU and Georgia. Georgia's going to be too much. I think SMU's Cinderella story ends here. And then Georgia advances to the national championship game, where we get match number 3 of Texas and Georgia on the year. Now, in the national championship game, oh gosh, I've picked Texas twice so far this year. I've been wrong both times. But I think the third time's a charm in this one. I think Texas will figure out a way to, because they moved the ball well against Georgia in the first half of the SEC championship game. They just weren't able to punch the ball into the end zone. They were bogged down with penalties and just mental mistakes. I think they'll have a lot of that ironed out, playing quality competition, going through the playoff. I think they'll be ready. And I think they'll have just enough to get the better of the Bulldogs and then win their first national championship since 2005. So there you have it. That is my first round predictions, as well as Texas will be our national champion this year. At least that's what I think. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who your national champion would be, what matchups you think I got wrong, which ones you're most excited to watch coming up this weekend. Thanks for tuning in to No Huddle Sports, and I'll see you in the next one.